Good morning, everyone, and welcome to today's meeting of Strategy and Resources Scrutiny Board. My name is Councillor Asghar Khan, and I will be chairing today's meeting. As usual, we are live on Leeds City Council's YouTube channel, and I welcome anyone watching through YouTube channel. Today's meeting covers some key issues linked to our organisational plan and Council's role and contribution to deliver the best city ambition, a strategy that we covered at our last meeting. We also look in details in finance. Members will note that we have taken away the board's interest in more detailed coverage of finance, health and services that are overspent and have come back with proposals for more coverage at 6 months and financial year end, subject to the views of the board today. We also have looked at the national picture of terms of the government's plan to fund local government to the recent comprehensive spending review and the consultation on the fair funding review that is ongoing. I will ask members to introduce themselves, and also guests, if you can introduce yourself as well, and I'll start from my left.
Thank you, Chair. Morning, everybody. Councillor Pauline Graham, Crossgates and Winmore Ward.
Good morning, everyone. Councillor Sharon Hamilton, Moortown Ward.
Good morning. Craig Timmins, Councillor for Carvely and Farsley Ward.
Morning, everybody. Andy Parnham, Councillor for Armley.
Morning, everyone. Councillor Tom Hinchcliffe, Bramley and Stanley Ward.
Good morning, Councillor Lisa Martin from Roundhay Ward.
Morning, Andrew Byram, Chief Digital Information Officer.
Good morning, everyone. Victoria Bradshaw, Assistant Chief Exec for Finance, Trade and Resources.
Morning, Mariana Paxton, Deputy Chief Executive.
Morning, everybody. Councillor Deborah Cooper, Exec Board Member for Resources.
Good morning, Councillor David Blackburn, Farnley and Wortley Ward.
Good morning, Councillor Dawn Seary, Pudsey Ward.
Hello, Ryan Stevenson, Councillor for Harewood Ward.
Morning, everyone. I'm Rob Clayton. I'm the Scrutiny Advisor to the board.
Thank you, board members and guests, for the introduction. So we're moving on to agenda item 6, is the minutes of the previous meeting held on the 16th of June 2020. Oh, sorry, apologies, I'm jumping ahead. Rob, will you go to the first 5 items of the business, please?
Thanks, Chair. They are fairly quick, so yeah, I'll get on with them. So items 1 to 5, thank you, Councillor Khan. Item 1 is appeals against inspection of documents, and there are none today. Item 2, Chair, is exclusion of the press and public, and there are no items that will require that today. Item 3 is late items, and whilst there are no late items, Chair, there was a supplementary information pack just to note that members received last Tuesday, the 8th of July, so that was circulated, which is Appendix 1 to Item 8. Item 4 is declarations of interest, and I will briefly pause to allow members to declare any. I shall take silence as none. And then item 5, Chair's apologies. And we do have apologies from Councillor Billy Flynn, with Councillor Dawn Seary attending as substitute today.
Thank you, Rob, for going the first 5 item of business this morning. So, board members, we're moving into item 6, minutes of the previous meeting held on the 16th of June 2025. That's on page 5 of the agenda pack. Do members accept these are true and correct? Thank you, Councillor Graham. Councillor Blackburn. Are there any matter arising from the minutes? Yes, Councillor Timmins.
Every time. Yeah, just a quick one. I asked a question in the last meeting about support for people struggling with council tax and signposting to agents and stuff like that, and they were going to come back to me with an answer. They have done. It's a good answer, and I just wanted to share it, that all documents contain signposting towards it. Staff are trained to support vulnerable residents and recognise that, and the service has regular meetings with the Debt Advice Agency through the Leeds Debt Advice Network. So it was all real positive. I think it'd be worthwhile just sharing it with the board.
Thank you, Councillor Timmins, and thank you, officers, for responding back to Timmins. And I think Rob did share with all board members the answers anyway. Thank you. Rob, do you have any matter rising? Anything to report back?
Yes, Chair. Just under minute 10, the last board meeting we had a discussion around staff absence and turnover rates, and then on Friday I provided that information that colleagues in HR had kindly sent on to me. So any questions relating to that do come back to me, and we can follow up as appropriate. Thank you.
Thank you, Rob. Are there any further matters arising from board members? Nope. Thank you. Okay, we will now move to agenda item 7, page 15 of the agenda pack, which is initial overview of the organisational plan, priorities in it. A really important place of work, and we have opportunity today to shape and comment on it. We have a presentation for this item, and I will hand it over to Mariana now.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, we'll run through this one relatively quickly as always, but try and make sure that you kind of have the key points and can inform the discussion. I wanted just to say first, this is quite an important one in terms of pre-decision scrutiny, and there's actually three related things in this. One is the organisation plan input, the plan that is for the whole organisation. The second is our opportunity to input to the local government outcome framework, which was published last week, the week before, kind of in the same week as the NHS 10-year plan. Obviously didn't get anything like the publicity, but actually is really important in terms of, kind of what are seen as those important services for government, and we will probably do a response to it. So any feedback that you give us on those KPIs today is quite important. And then also, it's linked to the later item on the comprehensive spending review and your input on to the comprehensive spending review and the fair funding review that Victoria will cover. So what I want to do today, just reminder in terms of the purpose and audience for the organisational plan and how it fits with the Leeds ambitions. Just to report back quickly, you helped us last time, and the Chair wrote on your behalf around the Best City ambition with some tweaks to that. That is on Executive Board for Wednesday this week, and we'll be, we'll still be refining it as we go through the summer, and then it'll be, because it's a crucial part of our budget and policy framework, that'll be at full council in September. And that, if you remember, is our citywide framework, not just for the organisation but for everybody, whereas this is the one we're talking about today. It is just about the organisation, which is really important, subtle but very important distinction, inextricably linked, but as I say, important. What we're trying, the financial position that you talk about most months, is really try and get that focus on financial sustainability, which is obviously something we've tried for quite a few years, but it has been challenging to get away from that kind of like short-term, savings plans. So this is one where Victoria and myself were working really closely to try and get a more integrated approach between what we say we want to do and the funds we've got to do that with. And it is to try and avoid the extensive amounts of reactive savings that inevitably we've had to make in recent years, and to be more proactive around our transformation. But obviously, how challenging the financial situation is. So it's definitely our aspiration, and we're working really hard to do it. But it's not an easy task. Then, as I've mentioned, the local government outcome framework as well, and we'll talk at the end in terms of the timescales and next steps, because you're quite early on in the process. Thanks, Rob. I've probably covered most of this, in particular that first bullet point about the financial sustainability. But this is a crucial plan in terms of what matters to your residents, the people that we serve. Why, which services are most important to them, and why our performance on those services is very important. There is a lot happening in the context at the moment, though. Devolution, NHS changes, public service reform. There's loads of changes happening. So this organisational plan is our opportunity as well to place, our next phase of planning within that, broader context, and make sure that the council and indeed the city can really seize those opportunities. As you know, we've had an announcement recently about public service reform related to relocation of civil servants and our role helping the government with the health mission. That's a good example where we want our plans and we want to be as able to, make the most of those opportunities as we can. And then ideally get to a clearer transformation programme right the way across the council. And crucially, and this links onto the comprehensive spending review, try and make the most of that multi-year settlement that we expect to get. I think we're starting to take it for granted that we'll get that, which is good, because we hopefully will. But what we don't want to take for granted is the opportunity that affords for the way we look at our own funding and the way that we potentially look at the way we fund others, like voluntary sector, for example. Can we use that to give more certainty? Because we should have a 3-year settlement when we get the numbers later on in the year. Thanks, Rob. Just to reiterate, primary audience for this is officers and members. It's not for the public, but it is important, for example, for some of our partners and for auditors. I think I've covered most of what's in this in terms of what we're trying to align it to and why we're trying to do that alignment, to make sure that it can meet the budget gap that we are, in all probability will have. Even though we've got hopefully a more generous settlement. Thanks, Rob. So there's just 4 parts to it, so relatively straightforward. First bit, as you'd expect, will be that kind of introductory context. The meat of it, if you like, is in part 2 and then part 3. So part 2 is going to be 4 Part 2 is going to be 4 cross-cutting themes, which are all about financial sustainability. So the first one is revenue growth, and this is it's very similar to the work we've been doing, but it's a slightly different way of looking at it to try and get more benefit from us working horizontally. So this is all the things that you would be familiar with that we've done over recent years, where we've been enterprising and charged for things, where we have sometimes regressively had to put up check fees and charges, where we've been really trying to optimise how much we get through council tax revenue, how much we get through business rates revenue, so that our financial base is as strong as it possibly can be. Now, we haven't particularly done anything risky in terms of investments, and we wouldn't want to do anything overly risky, but we will try and have a fresh look. Is there anything else that we could and should be doing to generate revenue that doesn't have any adverse risks? The next one, early intervention and demand management, is what we talk about. Most times we talk about the money, where we recognise that we want to appropriately reduce the demand for those expensive services, whether that's on children and families, adults, or indeed, homelessness, temporary accommodation, etc. Obviously, primary purpose with that is making it better for those residents, but also, to make sure that we can afford to invest all that we need to. And again, trying to look at that across. So, for example, what's the accommodation need right the way across all the children that are vulnerable that we look after, those who are in temporary accommodation, and, for example, young adults with learning disability? Is there a different way of looking at this to try and be more effective, make more effective use of our money? Locality working is what you do day in, day out in your patches, where you're working with services in that locality from whatever the sector, to try and help build strong communities and effective communities and community resilience. Try and get neighbours to help each other, everybody to look after themselves, and third sector partners, statutory organisations to be as effective as they can be based in localities. Also, as we know from previous papers here, reducing the size of our estate and having more multi-use buildings rather than single-use buildings. And then the last one, organisational efficiency and effectiveness, again is about reducing our cost base and making sure that we can, make the most of digital opportunities. So core business transformation, for example, you've had reports on here previously, and there's an update report on Executive Board on Thursday. That's where we've completely replaced our HR system and our finance system recently, so that hopefully saves time and is much more effective use of our staff. And although it's not really the part of this board, but the customer programme, which gets picked up by Communities Housing and Environment, but is absolutely is a cross-cutting piece of work right the way across the council. And then in that, we'll be, as you'd expect us to be, describing what the ambition is in each of those, what the major changes are, milestones, and ideally, relevant KPIs and also relevant costs where we've got them, or savings where we've got them. So those four things are really important in terms of the meat of this for a financial sustainability perspective. Thanks, Rob. The next bit of meat is about our contribution to the Leeds ambitions, as it will now be called, and in terms of that kind of at the heart of what we do, our delivery of crucial services to the people that we serve, and that'll just be organised to make it easier around what will be the four Leeds ambitions. So 3 that you're very used to seeing: health and wellbeing, inclusive growth, and sustainable city. And that 4th one, which I know is really important to everybody in this room, in terms of strong communities. So that will have all our KPIs in it that, again, you see twice a year anyway. So a lot of this isn't new to you. It's just every year, I suppose, we try and take a refresh of this to think, is there any more effective way that we can do it to gradually improve our, continuous improvement. And of course, as I say, that will also then help assess where we're at in terms of the national measurement. And then part 4, again, probably more for corporate governance and audit than yourselves, but crucially important to all members, is how we are, make sure we have strong and robust governance and effective organisational health. And one of those is things like absence management, which this board always expresses a good amount of interest in. Thank you, Rob. So we'll take feedback from this conversation today. We're engaging with a consultancy company on this called Empower, who are productivity experts, to try and give us any fresh insight, more benchmarking that we can do. And we'll be continuing this work right the way through the summer alongside the MTFS. And as you know, that timetable, we report to September Executive Board, with further work on the detail then, and ultimately these reports will be a part of the December Exec Board paper, ready for consultation in the normal way before February's full council. So as I say, there's lots in here that's not new, but we do try and take that disciplined approach of every year having a fresh look at how we're doing it in case we can do it any better. Thanks, Rob. So just picking up on the other aspect, as I say, I don't know whether you saw this in the media or in your LGA comms, that kind of thing, but the government is now consulting on something it's calling the local government outcomes framework, LGOF, for those who like 3-letter abbreviations. And they see this as running alongside the comprehensive spending review. So what are we asking local government to do, and what finance are we giving them to do it with? And it is, kind of intended to try and simplify and consolidate the measures that we are measured and assessed against. And in particular, that will assess whether or not we're meeting our best value duty, which is a statutory requirement. The next slide has got the detailed KPIs in it, but I'd have to put my glasses on, I think, to read them. We intended to have it on the desk, a copy on the desk. I don't know whether sorry, that's my communications perhaps not working. But we can forward this back out by email. The consultation doesn't close until September, but your perspective on which of these are important, not important, are there any gaps, etc., feels like a really important part of our submission back to government, because what they want is our feedback by September, with a view to them kind of doing further work on it, and then this becoming a final thing probably in November. So I've covered a lot there, Chair, but hopefully relatively quickly. Hopefully most of it is familiar. What we're keen on is any insight from you about what's important, anything either we have missed in terms of the organisational plan so far, or indeed from a national perspective on these KPIs.
Thank you, Mariana, for running through the presentation slides. Before I open to the board members for comments, does Councillor Cooper would like to add anything on this item at this stage?
Thank you, Chair. I think Mariana covered that quite eloquently, so I'll leave it for questions for Scrutiny Board members.
Thank you. I'll open to the board members. Are there any questions on this item? Councillor Timmins?
Thank you, Mariana, for that. So I'm looking at one part of it, my question, which is the revenue growth part of it. I don't know if I've misunderstood it when I've been kind of preparing for the meeting, because I accept what you say in terms of revenue from council tax and business rates and so on. But my mind automatically went to the things that have come before this board in the past, where I thought there's opportunities to get more income. For example, Meals on Wheels, active Leeds, footfall in museums, having a proper modern booking system in our civic venues to link them up, stuff like that. Because I think there's quite a lot of things that we could go on there. Might not make the same difference as your council tax, but I think they are important. And when we're trying to get money, it shouldn't be seen as us being greedy. It should be seen as us trying to get the best value for money. And I think the more things that we can go on like that, maybe the less pressures that we'll have on certain areas. Maybe one less tough decision has to be made on that. So I think that's a real opportunity, the revenue growth. And the last point I want to make on this is, quite often I've mentioned about getting the commercial manager here, but I said in the pre-meeting that after reading this, I've rethought that a little bit, because actually I think the commercial manager should be part of this, feeding into this revenue growth, and probably come as part. This comes back to scrutiny.
Yeah, thanks for that. I probably, in trying to be brief, I haven't covered everything, but you're right, those things would be in the mix, and we have been doing quite a lot on those over the years, but very definitely want to do more. Victoria's leading a bit of a review on those trading things at the moment to see what that optimum point is, where, you know, we're trading, we are generating income, it's not costing us more to do so, and also it's not negatively impacting residents in a you know, like you say, we're not being greedy. Do you want to add anything or not?
I think there's two sides to it as well. So there's where we're trading because it's the right thing to do, rather than we're trading because we're just doing it because we've done it historically. So that's why we're doing a fundamental review of the areas to make sure that we are adding the value, the quality of the services, we're meeting the needs of the most vulnerable, etc., as well as making a commercial return. The other side of it is the opportunities around economic growth as well in the city, and where we'd want a commercial manager around investment to drive that economic growth, so that where there's a sector that we want to bring into the city to develop, whether we can invest at that point to really drive employment and skills. So we're looking at that side of it as well as part from the revenue growth side. Okay, thank you.
Councillor Cooper?
I suppose just to add for some completeness on the response, that all suggestions, you know, are really welcome. So any scrutiny member at all, you know, that has, you know, any ideas about how you think we may be able to be more efficient with the finances, or indeed drive some income in the appropriate way, has to be in the appropriate way for us as a council, of course, then, you know, please do contact us, let us know. I'm more than happy for any member to contact me and let me know their thoughts on that, and we'll look into it and see, you know, where we can take it maybe. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Cooper. Mariana, with this plan set out more concrete action on how the Best City ambition will be delivered. So delivery is a strategy idea that BCA has.
It will set out the council's contribution to delivering the Best City ambition. You know, whether that's through, you know, delivering, might be some frontline services, it might be strategic services, or it might be the role that we play sometimes convening things. What it won't do is detail every tick and turn of what all partners will do to deliver the Best City ambition, because obviously that is more for those partners to set out.
Thank you. And that just leads, and then I'll bring Councillor Blackburn. This sets out our role as the Best City ambition. Do partner organisations have similar approach to defining this role in BCA delivery?
Yeah, I mean, the best example I can give you of that is Leeds Beckett University, who are just redoing their strategic planning activity at the moment, and it is entirely focused around the Leeds ambitions. And that, you know, Peter Slee, who's the Vice-Chancellor, has been chairing the anchor group, so he's very, you know, connected to it. And after that, the anchor institutions, we would expect them more to have their plans, you know, more framed around, over time, framed around the Leeds ambitions. And then, you know, our ideal would be, over time, even more organisations have, you know, set out very clearly what part they will play. But obviously that will take some time to achieve. But that's the intention, and there are some good examples already. I think the anchors is going to IIG, if I've got the initials right, Scrutiny, in September or October. So that might be an interesting one for this board to pay interest in as well.
Thank you. Councillor Blackburn.
I think what it says, the proposed features 1 and part 2 actually, and it mentions demand management. I think that is the key factor. The problem at the moment is why we're not getting a balanced budget, or why we're getting budget overspends, is because of that demand, and we're not managing it well enough. I mean, I think we've tried our best to manage it, but I don't think we've succeeded. Do you see any way we are going to be able to do that? Because clearly we need to do that to keep within those resources. But whatever we try to do, whatever we do with that, we always seem to be in the same position, in certainly in 2 areas, on adults and children's.
Yeah, I mean, it is very, very challenging, and as you know, most local authorities are similarly finding it challenging, the same as we are. And you know, we do think we've been doing a lot to manage demand. And there was an important word on the slide, which is about appropriately managing demand, because we have got to meet our statutory responsibilities as well, which, you know, sometimes will mean that costs us more than, you know, ideally we've got in the bank. But, you know, and that is the constant juggling act that local authorities are making. So what we're trying to do with this approach is try and look at it slightly differently. Now, it may not generate any extra savings. We may conclude, actually, you've done everything you can and just keep doing that. But we're taking the stance that, you know, let's try a different look at it to see if it does offer us anything different. And the best example is the one I mentioned when I was talking about the presentation, is looking at it more across the piece rather than just in directorates. And, you know, don't get me wrong, we don't just look at directorates now by any stretch of the imagination. There is a lot of good cross-working, as you know, but we're trying with this to say, is there a more strategic approach? And accommodation is one example that I mentioned, where we may be able to do something that might save us more money by looking at it that way. So, we're trying, but we still also need to make sure we meet our statutory requirements as well.
Yeah, Councillor Cooper.
Thank you, Chair. I just think it's important that I come in at this point because the demand pressures have been raised in terms of our financial management, and I think it's important that the board are aware that this is a national issue. All local authorities who have responsibility for social care are in very similar situations. And we are hopeful that going forward throughout this year that we will get a better settlement from the government, a multi-year settlement from the government that will allow us to plan better for those demands. In the budget already this year, we allocated for extra demand, but already we're seeing that allocation being outstripped by more demand. So, and in Leeds, we are really proud of what we do and how we achieve for vulnerable people in this city. So for children and adults who are in those vulnerable positions and situations, that actually it's not just fulfilling our statutory obligation, it's how we respond as an authority, and I'm sure it's how all members of Scrutiny would want us to respond when people in need come through our front doors, and we need to then appropriately deal with them, and sometimes, particularly in external placements, that's very costly to us, and it's difficult to forecast those costs, going forward. But like we say, this organisational plan and bringing together all of those lines and themes, that they will hopefully give us a better read across, so that we may be able to, at least be forecasting that demand a little bit easier. But also just to say, in terms of the demand for adults and children's, I'm meeting with the directors on a very frequent basis of those areas. So, and we are looking over all of their lines of their budget and lines of their demand as we go forward as well. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Cooper. Mariana.
Yeah, just to say, in Victoria's presentation later, we've got some graphs that try and illustrate that demand so that people can, kind of visually see what that demand is looking like, and from your casework what that complexity is coming through as well. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you. Mariana, in your presentation, you mentioned productivity. How do you plan to improve productivity?
Yeah, if I had the answer to productivity in the public service, I probably wouldn't be sat here in the nicest possible way. I think because it is a really complex topic, when even in the service industry, in lots of service industry, it's a really complex topic. It's not just in local government, but I think local government, particularly because of our complex, diverse context, I think it's more complex. So if you take something like the contact centre, productivity is measured in quite a hard and fast way. Or Andrew's service desk, you've had reports here where that is measured in quite a hard and fast way. With lots of other services, it's much more difficult because it is more qualitative, subjective, and harder to measure. What we're trying to do with it, in particular, it's the things I mentioned before. It's making the most of digital opportunities where we can, AI where we can, and where it's safe to do so. I mentioned the new HR system, the new finance system, the fact that over time they will be taught to each other more, which is very significant, that will then save managers and staff some time, so that will increase our productivity. Having, as you know, with the fact that everybody now has a digital sign-on, that will hopefully make sure every member of staff is more connected, more able to be communicated with, able to give us their feedback, able to get more from colleagues. So there's a whole range of measures that we're looking to improve productivity, but it's not a kind of, it's an art, not a science, perhaps is the best way to put it.
Thank you for that answer, Mariana. Next on the list is Councillor Stevenson.
Thanks. It was just on the productivity point, in that I just wonder if, as an example, I've been trying to deal with a case on behalf of a constituent to do with educational health and care plan. But one of the issues actually in terms of an employment side is that the case worker only works 3 days a week. So in practice there's meant to be somebody who then picks up the other half of the job. But in reality, that means when I'm chasing or inquiring for updates, the conversation always, I need to check that with the person that's not present. So, and that's obviously impacting productivity then, in terms of that case progressing. So have we explored where certain jobs could be exempt from job shares or part-time to ensure an increase in productivity? I'm sure there'll be other examples across the city. Part-time working and flexible working is great for some jobs, but possibly for not all.
I can't comment on the specifics, obviously, but I understand the point that you make. I think it's employment law that anybody can ask to do job share or work part-time. And I think we'd want to kind of, wherever we could, offer that opportunity in terms of our ambitions around having a diverse workforce. I think a lot of that is then how it's kind of operationalised to make sure that, for example, referring to what I said earlier in terms of the IT system, on that example, ideally, and as I say, I don't know the specifics, but if you are in a job share circumstance, then, that somebody's kind of tracking and putting on the case, all right, Councillor Stevenson is expecting a response on Thursday, can you make sure it's followed up when when we get information from that we're waiting for. So I think a lot of that is then about how it's operationalised, and we try and make sure that managerially we're still making sure we meet customer and the public's needs and members' needs, whilst also being a diverse employer.
Thank you. Any more questions on this item? I see no indication. So can I thank Mariana and Councillor Cooper for answering those questions as well. And recommendation on page 15 of the agenda pack, are board member happy to approve? Yep. Thank you. So we can move on to item 8 on agenda pack. Before I do that, can I thank Councillor Cooper for giving us the early sight of the financial health report. We also look at this before the executive board does on Wednesday, and I think it highlights the open and transparent approach we have to financial matter in Leeds. This is our first look at the financial performance in 25-26. As I know, the start of this also sets out the possible approach to how we can look in more details at the area overspend. So I will ask Victoria to go through the presentation. Over to you, Victoria.
Thank you, Chair. As Chair said, this is the first financial update for the current financial year 25-26. What I would say is that this has been a deep dive into the financial position. Usually for the first 2 months of the year, we do a high-level review of the financial position, but because we knew that the pressures that we were seeing last financial year, there's been considerable work looking at the financial position and where we think the forecasts are going throughout the year. So this is the position that we're thinking at month 2 forecast forward to the end of the financial year. We are seeing pressures continuing in adults and health and children's and families, and they are reporting 9.2 million overspend each, which means that with some slight balanced positions in the other directorates, we're looking at 19.5 million overspend. On the next slide, you can see is a percentage of the net managed budget. So this is the net position, not looking at the gross expenditure. It's just under 5% in adults and health and just over in children's and family of their net managed budget that is actually an overspend position. And as the total, it's 3%. So it's not an ideal position, but when we think about the size of the council's budget, it is within the what we can currently manage. Just going into more detail on the different directorates. In adults, we are seeing the client's income shortfall. Now, this is as people pay for the services that they receive in adults and care. They've hit, quite a number of them are hitting the threshold where we can charge for those services. So people can retain, I think it's about 23,000. Once they've hit that threshold, we can't charge for those services, and those services are paid for by the council, and that's where we're seeing this pressure start to materialise. We're also seeing pressures within demand, which we talked about earlier, but this is across all cohorts, so it covers both older people, mental health and learning disabilities. And as we've said earlier, this is a national. What we did see, which if we go on to the next slide, in adults around their growth, was that we saw a different trajectory over last financial year than we've seen previously. So when we set the budget for this financial year, which we do through the autumn, we'd base the forecasts on the previous trends. However, for the year 2024, there was a different curve than we'd experienced in other financial years, and it didn't drop off like we were expecting because of the complexity of cases, but also because of people living longer in residential and nursing care. So that has contributed to the overspend position within adults and children's. We are monitoring that very carefully and closely, and we're looking at where we think that trend will be in the next 12 months so that we can build that into the demand pressures into the MTFS for adult social care. In children's services, on the next slide, it's we're seeing the continuation of the cost of external placements continuing into the financial year, and also the numbers of children that need our provision of services. The overspend is also in the independent fostering agency, where we're seeing more children placed in that area, and also secured accommodation. We have got a savings proposal around children's centres, which is coming back to Executive Board. That saving will be achieved in the fullness of time, but not in this financial year, which is adding to a pressure. And then we have recognised that we've had a significant increase in the number of children requiring education, health and care plans. That's meant that we have got a number of children who are waiting those plans, and we need to invest more resource into that directorate around education psychologists, etc., to enable them to review those cases and to get those plans in place. And therefore we're proposing to make an allocation from the strategic social care reserve to cover that. In children's services, we are seeing the total number of looked after children reduce, and that's that orange line on the graph. What is happening though is that the number of children in that looked after cohort, although it's smaller, the number of children who require services provided by the council is increasing, and that's due to the complexity of the needs of those children and the provision of services that they require. So there's more children in that cohort that require our support, which is meaning that it's driving the costs up for the service. We're also seeing the number of placements in external residential increasing over and above what we'd forecast to be in the budget, and the reason for that is around the number of children that need the provision, and also the time that it takes to to accommodate those children within the city, which we're working on very hard with the service around making that provision happen. In the other directorates, as you saw from the graph, there are a number of small over and underspends being reported. However, behind those figures, the directorates have worked really hard to report those positions and are taking corrective action to manage that within the resources they've got available. On top of the core directorate spends, we have the dedicated schools grant, which is specifically for schools. We are seeing that we've got a slight underspend in that area. However, we are forecasting that will increase as the year goes through, and therefore we are waiting. We've had the announcement around the dedicated schools grant that the statutory override will be extended. However, we don't know what the implications of that will be, and we're waiting a white paper in the autumn. I'll cover that more under the item on the CSR. What that means is, though, that we do need a management action plan that's being developed at the moment to make sure that we manage our dedicated schools grant within the resources that we've got available. And the housing revenue account at the moment is forecasting a balanced position. There are a significant number of budget action plans that are being delivered for 2025-26. This is the most that I've seen at the council. So we identified 103.8 million of in-year savings, and we carried some over from last financial year, 3.6 million. So there are 107.5 million of savings in total that are being delivered across the council. So all those things around transformation and efficiency and effectiveness are being delivered by the services. We are forecasting at the moment that 17.8 million of that won't be delivered in this financial year, but will be delivered in future financial years. So it's a delay rather than a non-delivery. We have taken action to start to address the overspend and to try and bring it back into a balanced position. And that has meant, unfortunately, that we've had to continue with the requirements around only essential travel, the recruitment freeze, the tighter controls continuing around agency and overtime, and that services do only spend where it's critical for service delivery. Just on the council tax and business rates, where we are on collection, because this is a key income form for the council. We are looking at income collected to date of 18.17%. That's slightly behind where we were in 24-25. But in the fullness of time, we are looking at 98.5% of that total income being collected. And on business rates, again, we're slightly behind where we were in 24-25 at 21.05%, and our targeted collection for the year is 97.7%, and we do usually hit those collection rates in the fullness of time. I think that's what I wanted to cover this morning. Thank you.
Thank you, Victoria, for the comprehensive presentation. I will open to the board members for any questions or comments. Or Councillor Cooper.
Thank you, Chair. And just to say that obviously it's disappointing that we're already forecasting an overspend this year, but when you've heard of the detail of the work that's been undertaken by the directorates to manage those overspends and bring in action plans to bring them down as the year goes on, I'm sure that you'll have the same confidence that I have in our directorates to be able to achieve some of that. I think the one figure for me that really stands out is that we've got £107 million worth of savings that are being delivered throughout the year as well. That is a significant, it's a huge amount of savings in an organisation of our size. And if you look back to last year's achievements of the savings that we made, you'll see that our track record is really good on achieving those savings that we've already identified, and finding more savings as we go throughout the year, not only the ones that we identified early in the budget setting process, but driving more savings and efficiencies throughout the year. I do want to say also that we are extremely open and transparent about our financial position. We take a report to Executive Board at every meeting of Executive that Executive Board sits, with the monthly financial monitoring each time, and are always open to questions around what that contains, what that means, and how we're going to deal with any overspends or any matters that are held within it. And I'm really pleased actually that the timing has allowed Scrutiny Board to actually have sight of this and discuss this before Executive Board this time. Executive Board will be seeing this on Wednesday and looking into the detail of it then. The other thing I wanted to say is we have noted from previous conversations at the board members' requests that the directors of the areas with overspend come to Scrutiny Board to maybe answer some more detailed questions about the service area itself. And so we're proposing that directorates will attend this Strategy and Resources Scrutiny Board a 6-month interval. So they'll come twice a year to answer your detailed questions. So hopefully, scrutiny members, we are listening to what you're saying and want to try and achieve those things for you. I'll leave it there for any comments, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Cooper, and thank you for assuring us that the overspend directors will come to our Strategy and Resources Scrutiny Board as well. Councillor Martin.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Deborah. That was Councillor Cooper. That was really helpful. Just in particular, when the Director of Children's Services comes to this scrutiny board, can we look in particular at that conundrum that Victoria mentioned about the reducing number of children in care, but the increasing complexity of their needs, but also the shortage of places within Leeds and needing to place them. So if we can look at that in a bit more detail, I think it will be beneficial for this scrutiny board to do that. Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa, Councillor Martin, and Councillor Cooper.
That's okay. I don't mind anybody calling me by my first name. It's absolutely fine. And I suppose really just, yes, we can look in more detail at that when the directors do come to this scrutiny board. But just to say that is being looked at in detail at the Children's Scrutiny Board as well. So that I know that Councillor Flynn is looking into the financial matters of children's, and they will be looking at all of that. I think it's really we're doing an awful lot of work about bringing children back to Leeds. So the director and her teams, we're now building and opening children's homes in Leeds all across the city to bring people who are in external placements back to Leeds placements. Not only is it good in terms of financial management, it's good in terms of they looked after children that need to be in the city where they belong, really, unless there's a reason that they need to be away from the city, which of course we'd always maintain that external placement. But that work is going ahead. There are a number already online and open with children in, but there are also plans for more children's homes as well. I know there are plans to increase foster care within the city as well, so that we will hopefully be able to bring more children back in terms of that foster care. You know, and there are a number of things that are happening already. Of course, the Director of Children's would be able to explain in much more detail about those plans. I think the problem is, as Victoria outlined in her first presentation on this, is that the number of children that we are looking after is reducing, but those that are coming into care are much more complex cases that are needing the higher levels of provision when they initially come into care as well. So it's a very complex area, but I'm sure that Julie would be more than happy to come and answer questions to the board at the time.
Thank you, Councillor Cooper.
I was just
Martin.
going to say thank you for that reassurance, and I'm sure that the director is on with it. So let's not waste officer time by scrutinising her twice then, if she's been scrutinised by children and families. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Martin. I've got Councillor Hamilton next.
Thanks, Chair. My question is regarding the vacancy freeze and reducing in the agency. I know that we're trying to save money and the directors are working really hard, but in some departments we're going to have to recruit. So do we have a vacancy panel that looks at that? And a lot of people join the agency and come back, especially where we need the expertise. So I know we're always saying that we're reducing agency. They cost a lot more, so wouldn't it be cheaper to employ a staff rather than use an agency, because I know how expensive they are. And we need to ensure that all the saving and the freezing of vacancies, we're not putting pressure on our staff here, because then we've noticed that the sickness absence is increasing, you know, and could be due to stress, etc. So we need to be very careful. Yes, we have to make savings, but it's the staff that are remaining following the recruitment, the freeze of recruitment. So can you try and address some of those?
Okay, thank you, Chair. We do have a vacancy control panel. It's part of the Best Council Financial Challenge Group. So at first the directors consider them at their directorate level, the vacancies that they would like to fill, and then they propose the ones to come through to Financial Challenge to discuss them and to make sure that we're happy from a financial perspective that those posts are recruited to. There is an exemption list, so those services that are frontline, that are providing statutory services, that we know that we need to provide a certain level of cover, they come through the process just so we're aware of them, but they're automatically recruited too. When the vacancy panel's considering those, we do ask for the number of people on the team, the number of people of vacancies that they're holding, and the rationale around why they need to recruit to those roles. And we take all that into consideration when we agree or not to recruit to those roles, and whether there's any agility of moving staff around, etc. So there is a lot of detailed conversations with those. It's a process that we've had in place now for a couple of years, unfortunately, but it's meant that we've really refined it and we recognise those roles that we do need to recruit to. But we are very much aware of the pressure on staff of keeping those vacancies, because the reason why they're in the structures is to deliver services. However, just at the moment, until we get into the position where we're not significantly overspending, we do need to keep that freeze in place. There has been a lot of work on agency and overtime, where each of the directorates have reviewed that to make sure to see if there's other ways of working, whether we can employ more staff on a permanent basis, if there are those staff out there. Is there different working patterns that we can use to reduce overtime, and whether there is any opportunities around where there are pressures, where agency staff are required, can we move staff into those roles? from within the council. So we are doing a lot of work around that. But in some cases, it's more cost effective to use overtime than to have a full-time person. And on agency, a lot of it is around demand for the recruitment that we need, and it's getting hold of that demand. Thank you.
Thank you, Victoria. Councillor Hamilton, are you happy with the response? Yeah, thank you. Before I bring in Councillor Hinchcliffe, the pay award has been offered at 3.2% subject to the trade union agreement. Will a saving be made based on the plan for 3.5% in the budget?
At the moment, it's the employer's offer of 3.2%, and that's not been accepted by the union. So we will be waiting for the outcome of what the unions will want to do next. If it was settled at 3.2%, there would be about 1.5 million saving across the whole council for that differential of 0.3%. But at the moment, we can't assume that because we don't know the outcome of the negotiations at this time.
Thank you. Councillor Hinchcliffe.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, my question's on the housing revenue account. It's good to see that it's projecting a balanced position because of the pressure on utilities. I know the increase in acquisitions and reacquisitions is welcome in Bramley and Stanley, where we've had 13 since the last local elections, which is great news. And there are a wide range of properties too. It's not just, houses. There's flats and maisonettes and things like that. My question is this forecast higher since the spending review? I know we're coming on to the spending review soon, but is the forecast higher since then, or will it be revised very soon, given the announcement of £39 billion from the government for social housing? Obviously, we don't know where that's going to come in the country, but it'd be good to get an indication of the date of kind of these forecasts.
Okay, so the forecasts are based on this financial year, and are therefore based on what we know will happen in this year. The house building, etc., that's being proposed will affect future years, and we're reviewing the medium-term financial strategy now over the summer. So we will start to build those forecasts in around the additional rent that we would receive once that house building's been complete. So it is part of the review for this year that will affect future years' budgets positions for the housing revenue account. Thank you.
Thank you, Victoria. Councillor, are you happy with the response? Yeah, thank you. Councillor Timmins.
Thank you. My first point links in a little bit to what Councillor Martin was saying, because we're looking at this purely from a budgetary perspective, but when the financial pressures, the main ones, being felt by the directors that are responsible for looking after people, some of the most vulnerable people, the conversation does stray into what other scrutiny boards might discuss as well. On page 16 of the supplement, it describes the budget action plan for children and families, and that the pressures of these are the result of action plans not being delivered. And we should recognise that the increase in demand, for example, EHCP requests, it's 35% up on this time last year, and it was already an area that we're under a lot of pressure in. And so my question on this bit is just, where are we in terms of modelling what the trend's going to look like, so that we can predict these pressures earlier around the budget? And second point is just on page 48 of that supplement as well. We've got the summary table of all the different lines of the pressures. The right-hand column of these summaries gives us a bit more detailed information, so why it is like that, any mitigations, what we're doing, things like that. But the section on the children's and families, there's not very much in it. I just feel that when it comes to scrutiny, we need to have this information. some of it is in the pages leading up to it, but you know, it is a public document, and I think some people would just go to that summary so we could have a bit more detail in that bit, and that was just a point on that, really.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Just on the budget action plans, there is, in Children's and Families, there is a sufficiency strategy that was agreed at Executive Board last year, which forecasts where we think numbers of children looked after will be over the next few years, and also around the provision and what we were striving to do around that provision in the city and what we would require. There is delays in achieving some of that because of the time that it takes around opening small group living homes, around the foster care recruitment, although we have had some big campaigns around foster carers. What we have seen is that we've had some people leaving the services, have retired, and some new people coming in, which has kept us steady, whereas a lot of local authorities have seen a decline in the number of foster carers, which is obviously the placements. And there is a plan around how we drive that up further. We are working with the service around the robustness of the forecasting, but as we've discussed today, it is really complex area, and it is really difficult to foresee the complexities of the children that require our support and provision. Although we are doing a lot of work with them to try and see those children that are on edge of care and what we could do around prevention to mitigate those children coming in, but trying to forecast that forward. I do note the position around on page 48. I will get that with more detail in it. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Victoria. Mariana.
Can I just maybe add an illustrative example of what Victoria is saying about, like you point about, can we model it better? I mean, I'm not a social worker, I'm not a children and families expert, but I did spend a few years ago working in children and families. If on a Friday night duty get a call and it's one child who, you know, harm, neglect, and you do a section 47 and you need to act and take that child into care, and say, for example, that child's 3, then, you know, probably not a problem. You know, find accommodation, etc. If that Friday night, and I'm oversimplifying to illustrate, but if that Friday night call is a family of 5 and they're all teenagers, and you do a section 47 inquiry, and you know the social worker judgment is you kind of need to take that child into care, then actually finding accommodation for that, and I'm exaggerating with the Friday night example deliberately, but I'm just trying to bring it to life a little bit. Then finding accommodation for 5 teenagers who may all have different kind of challenges. That might be about learning inclusion challenges, it might be social behavioural issues, etc., emotional issues. Then that's a lot harder. Now, what we can't predict is what's going to present itself at the front door, because we just, you know, we don't know. So our modelling, you know, we'll always try and get it better and better and better and refine it. And we'll always have a look back at trends with benchmark, you know, and try and do some of those predictions. But it's another one, unfortunately, it's not a science. You know, you can't do it accurately because when you're dealing with citizens, we don't know what we're going to be presented with. And I just thought that might help bring to life what, because we talk about it as graphs here, but obviously this is people, it's families, and you're right to set out that challenge of we are balancing, you know, the kind of the money with the statutory requirements, and our, you know, being a compassionate city and wanting to make sure that we look after people when they need it.
Thank you, Mariana. Councillor Timmins, are you happy with the response?
Yeah, just to say thank you. It does help to get that extra context, so I do appreciate what you both said there.
Okay. Victoria, on the supplementary pack on page 25, it references the contingency reserves. We are currently over-projecting and overspend. Do we anticipate using the reserves to balance the balancing the measures?
Obviously, we're early in the year to be bringing this report with the overspend position, and we are looking at ways with the directors around how we can mitigate this. and we will continue working on that throughout the year. If this position doesn't reduce or it gets worse, then yes, we will be calling on those strategic contingency reserves, which was the purpose why they were set up, reflecting that we know that there are pressures within the forecast and that it's very difficult to predict, and that's why we set up the reserves in the first place, to be able to manage those within the financial year. But as I say, everything will be done through the year to try and bring this position down, so that we don't need to use all the reserve. Thank you.
Thank you. Any more questions or comments from board members? No. Councillor Cooper, before I conclude this item, do you want to add any comments?
Thanks, Chair. I'd just like to thank Scrutiny Board members for their interest, for their support and their comments on the financial management of the organisation. It's really important to us, so we'll continue to bring the reports to you and take your comments on board. Thank you.
Thank you, Victoria. Thank you, Mariana. And thank you, Councillor Cooper. Are we happy with the report and the recommendation are on page 19, board members? Yep, thank you. So we now move to agenda item 9, page 23 of the agenda pack, which looks at the national picture and how government is reforming local government funding. Board members have been to look in more details at the finance, and I hope this provides more background on the issue at the national level. This is an ongoing consultation that closes in August, and we can now look to input into the Council's response to that. So I will hand it over to Mariana and Victoria to go to the presentation.
Thank you, Chair. I'm just going to do a verbal update, if that's okay with everybody. So the consultation was announced on the 11th of June, and there is a lot of change proposed in that consultation, and as with anything, it's the devil in the detail that we really need to get underneath. Also there's a lot of uncertainty around the quantum of funding that's going to be available and how we model that with all these different changes that are happening. So we are analysing it at the moment. We're talking with other core cities, we're talking with Sigoma, and we have, which a lot of local authorities subscribe to, Pixel, who do a lot of modelling on our behalf, but they're dealing with the same variables and the changes, so it is really subjective. We'll know more in the autumn, which will give us that bit more certainty. There are a number of consolidations, so one of the key principles, or there are a number of key principles that the government's committed to is ensuring that the funding that we have available for local government is targeted effectively at the places and services who need it the most, and that it's allocated in a way that empowers local leaders to deliver their priorities. And the key objective is around fairness, simplicity, stability, transparency, sustainability and accountability. And I think that's key in this consultation, is making sure that those key objectives are met and in our responses. They have, on that simplicity note, extensively consolidating a number of the grants into the settlement funding, or the proposal is, but we don't know whether all the quantum of all those grants added together will be what actually goes into the settlement funding assessment. But one of the key things that we are looking from this when we do get the settlement is that it's a 3-year settlement, which will give us some certainty, although may not be substantially more funding, but it will let us know what we're dealing with on the longer term rather than from each year, which will help with the Council's resilience and financial sustainability, that Mariana talked about before. The consultation ends on the 15th of August, and there's 46 questions that they're asking us to respond on, which is we're working across directorates on that response. And then we should receive the policy statement, which will give us a bit more certainty in September, October time. And then the provisional settlement is expected in the same timescales as we normally receive it, which is in mid to end of December. It is worth looking at the few of the headlines that were in the actual spending review when it was announced. So the big thing is that all local government have been looking for is certainty around the SEND, the special education needs statutory override, because a number of local authorities, I think majority, have got a deficit position and have got negative reserves. That has now been announced that it will be extended to 2028, which does give us time as local authorities to build management action plans. But we're also waiting for the white paper, which is around the reform of education, health and care plans and SEND children, and that should be announced in the autumn. We're obviously seeing changes around the council tax and business rates, so there'll be a business rates reset and a reform of those. And there is still an open door around the fees and charges, especially fees and charges that are set nationally. So we do want to make sure that we respond on those and around local discretion on what some of those fees and charges should be. There's a Healthy Start scheme, which is milk and food for low-income families. And there's also a new fund, which is the Crisis and Resilience Fund. But that fund is taking over the Housing Support Fund. The amount that's in that pot for the Crisis and Resilience Fund is, however, lower. So that means that we will have less available for housing support. For adult social care, we are waiting for the Casey review, which will report in the autumn and in 2026, and again in 2028. So we'll be wanting to understand what that reform review will look like. And then there's also been the public health grant. We're not expecting any changes, but also no increases, so we think it's going to be cash flats in that area. There have been 25 Trailblazer neighbourhoods announced, and one of them is in Middleton Park, and they should receive up to 20 million over the next decade. And obviously we talked about earlier about the 1.5 million houses and the 39 billion investment over the next 10 years. And also around 2.5 billion, which is going to be made available for new developments, so low interest loans for those developers to encourage development to happen. There are a number of other announcements, but I think I'll leave it there and just ask if there's any questions, if that's okay, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Victoria. Any questions or comments from board members? Yeah, Councillor Stevenson.
Thanks. In terms of the 3-year settlement, I was obviously welcome. In practice, is it frozen, or is there within the methodology of how they'll do it the flexibility to respond to? I mean, there are sort of economic crises that are over governments, whatever colour, are making, and then there's the external stuff you can't predict. So, is there still the possibility that in year 2 they have to go back in the spending review and reassess, or is it a given that it's definitely going to happen?
I mean, that's a really difficult question, isn't it? In the past, when we've had a 3-year settlement, that's been the certainty. But obviously, if something fundamentally happened that people couldn't predict, then it's in the government's gift to re-look at that and look at the settlement that's provided. But I've never known it, but I would never say never. Okay.
No, I didn't really ask. It's more about your contingency, I guess, isn't it, and reserves levels to ensure that you have a little buffer in case, but generally.
Yes, so when we set the medium-term financial strategy, that's why a few years ago we created the Strategic Contingency Reserve to look at if there were changes in funding, but also the pressures. And that has served us well over the last few years, and we would be continuing that, or I'd recommend we'd be continuing with that over the life of the medium-term financial strategy. It gives the council that resilience that it needs and enables us to be able to react when things that you couldn't predict come forward.
And the other point I was just going to say around in terms of consultation response, the issue of changing the formula and the methodology. I'd mentioned that in terms of the Children's Centre review, the issue of the different ways you have to deliver services in more rural communities to urban ones and the cost implications of that. And whilst it's a problem for neighbouring councils like North Yorkshire that the government have removed the rural services grant, so they're £14 million worth off in delivering those services, flipping to one that focuses purely on deprivation on the tin sounds like Leeds as an urban council might be beneficiary, but the devil's always in the detail, and we've been hit in the past where our leafier areas outweigh the inner city areas which might be more deprived, and as Councillor Blackburn mentioned privately earlier, and I represent one of those areas, that there are real pockets of deprivation within more affluent communities, and actually in those areas it's probably the worst place to live because your services are so far away. So a point, if we are lobbying or putting a consultation response in, a methodology that just uses local authority data probably isn't going to be that helpful to us, whereas one that uses the super output areas might be, because it might mean that Leeds ends up being better off in that process.
As I said, the consultation is really complex with all the different factors that they're taking into account and that methodology of how they're distributing the grant. There has been a lot of discussion with central government at how they would achieve that and the different pitfalls of using different data to another data set. And they have listened and taken that into consideration. It's really difficult to comment until we get more of the detail, but we can definitely raise it in the consultation response on what data sets we feel are more appropriate. I would say that they're using the census from 2022, which does cause some authorities concern because of the might have been 2020 actually. I'll confirm what date it was. The last census when we were in COVID and there was a lot of migration. So there are pros and cons from the different data sets that they can do depending on what authority you're at.
Thank you, Victoria. Councillor Stevenson, are you happy? Yep, thank you. Victoria, when will the fair funding review take effect, please?
So this is for 2026-27 for 3 years. So 26, 27, 27, 28, 28, 29.
Okay, thank you.
Thank
Councillor Blackburn?
It's not what it says, it's what it doesn't say, isn't it? That's the difficulty. I have to laugh when it says fair funding review. I think, quite honestly, we want a fair funding review for Leeds. And I think that's one of the things we have to say to them, because we ain't always treated fairly. And as we were talking privately earlier on, there are situations where we will have numbers of, sheer numbers of deprived people in our city, and we'll get less than somewhere that's got a smaller amount because of that ring round us that's reasonably wealthy. And I think the fact is we've got to appreciate that we've got these services they've got these services to deliver across this city. So as I say, I hope it works out okay, but from experience, when they ever change it never seems to work for Leeds.
Yeah, I'll bring Councillor Cooper in.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I think that, early indication, of course, with our 1-year settlement from the government meant that we were better off than we would have been. When they looked at their discretionary grant that they gave us based on the methodology of looking at deprivation, meant that we got extra money in the city due to that. It's about the consultation, really. So what I'd say to you all who are concerned about the fair funding review and what it's going to mean for the city is make sure that your comments are fed into that consultation. And we're happy to receive any comments that you've got about those methodologies of how the government might well look at allocating the money on a different basis and how that might work for the city. But let's not, damp it down before it's even started. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Cooper. Councillor Hinchcliffe.
Thank you, Chair. I note that question 45 refers to home to school transport in reference to SEND. There is a reference, a very fleeting reference in the consultation documents to post-16 SEND, 16 to 18, it says, transport. And I just wondered, are we using our response to this and the response to that question as an opportunity to put in our thoughts on the SEND white paper in autumn as well? I understand there is a separate consultation on that, but of course it's all linked together in what does constitute fair funding, and are we going to push for the extension of statutory guidance on post-16 transport and the relevant funding that comes with that? Thanks, Chair.
We will be responding to this consultation based on those key points, but because we won't get the white paper until the autumn, we won't know exactly what they're proposing, so we'll need to do it, our views of where we are now on this, and then we'll be able to respond back in the autumn on the white paper consultation as well. But this consultation has been done across the directorates, so all the directors are feeding in, so the Director of Children's will be feeding into this to make sure that we pick up the key points around children's home to school transport.
Thank you. It's really welcome that you're looking at it where we are now, because I think that's the most realistic. I don't think we can or should forecast, what the government may or may not do on SEND. Governor at West Silk is the interest here, and I know they'll be pleased to hear that as well. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Hinchcliffe. Victoria, do you want to turn your mic off, please? Thank you. Any more questions or comments from the board member? Okay, thank you. So as Councillor Cooper said, if this is our opportunity for any comments to feed in. Please do feed in, and I know the date because it's my birthday on the 15th of August. So it wasn't planned anyway, but I know it's 15th of August. So I urge members, board members, and whoever's listening, please do feed in to this consultation, and that ends on the 15th of August. So can I thank everybody, and are we happy with the report and recommendation on page 23? Yep, thank you. Can we move on to the final agenda item, which is the work programme? Can I thank the guests? And if you want to stay, you can, and if you want to go, you can. It's up to you. And I will hand it over to Rob now for the work programme. Thank you, Rob.
Yes, thank you, Chair. So the work programme that we consider at each board meeting that we have. Just to highlight that this item, Appendix 1, takes account of comments made in June under the sources of work item, where members had a chance to shape the work programme for the year. But obviously, as Councillor Khan has said, it's open to member input, so please do let us know if you do have any areas of interest that you want us to pick up. Appendix 2, Chair, is executive board minutes from June, and I think that covers the update. Thank you.
Thank you, Rob. Any comments or questions from the board member on the work programme? Nope. Thank you. Are we happy with the report and the recommendation on page 163? Yes, thank you. That brings us to the end of today's business, and thank you for attendance and your contribution today. Our next meeting scheduled for the 15th of September at 10:30 a.m. and our pre-meeting at 10 o'clock. Thank you, and have a lovely day.